Hi, and welcome to iTenif Healthcare Solutions webinar. We're excited to be producing NextGen PM tools for managing unapplieds, deposits, refund, and credit balances. My name is Chelsea Grover, and I'm the Marketing Communications Coordinator for iTenif. I'd like to take a moment to explain the process for today's presentation. First, I'd like to mention that this webinar will be recorded, and that we'll send out a copy of the slides along with the recording within the next week. Next, for those of you who aren't familiar with iTenif, I wanted to share a bit of who we are with you. We specialize specifically in next-gen healthcare, and our goal in life is to make delighted clients by helping them get the absolute most out of their next-gen software investment. We're passionate about providing solutions for healthcare provider partners, which in turn help them to improve patient care, enhance the patient experience, and maintain a financially healthy practice. To sum it up, we do everything next-gen. We also have a number of next-gen productivity add-on solutions, including ChartGuard and Refund Manager, and we'll be talking about Refund Manager today. So next, I wanted to mention an upcoming webinar that we'll be presenting on February 4th. In it, we'll do a live demonstration of ChartGuard for NextGen. ChartGuard can be an integral component of your practice's business continuity requirements under this HIPAA security rules by providing access to critical patient clinical information during a downtime event and requires no complex, expensive, or redundant network or server infrastructure. ChartGuard options include on-demand for generating individual patient charts in PDF format and Archiver for bulk conversions of your NextGen chart to PDF format. So join us in 2 weeks to learn more about that. Okay, so back to today's presentation on NextGen PM tools for managing unapplieds, deposits, refunds, and credit balances. At the end of the presentation, we'll open the floor up to questions from you. We'll answer all the questions at the end, but you can type them in the questions of the webinar control panel whenever they occur to you. And finally, for audio clarity purposes, everyone's phone will remain muted throughout the entire webinar. If you experience audio issues, please use the chat box to let us know so we can resolve them. And again, questions may be entered in the questions box. So as we get started today, I wanted to launch a quick two-question poll because we are covering a range of topics today. So just so we can make sure that we are focusing and hitting the right points on your pain points in your solution, if you take a look at your screen and answer the first one is, what patient credit functions are you looking to optimize? Issuing refunds to patients, issuing refunds to insurance, moving line item credits between charges and encounters, and managing balance controls, positive or negative money on the same charge. So if everybody will take a minute to reply to that, and we'll close this down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I'm going to close that one. And we are going to launch the next one here. Again, this one's equally as fast. We're just looking to know, what unapplied balance functions are you looking to optimize? Resolving a backlog of unapplied credits like copays or prepays, managing deposit money taken for future purposes, or managing unapplied dollars on a daily basis. So if everybody will just look at their screen and answer that question, and then we'll go ahead and get started after that. Okay, so we'll close this one in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so thank you for participating in that. And without any further delay, I'm going to introduce our presenters for today. Tom Seco is iTenif's Business Development Manager and a subject matter expert on the products. And Joel Schultz is the Director of Product Solutions at iTenif, which means that he and his team are the people that actually built these powerful tools, and thus is going to be in a great position to demonstrate it. So Tom, I'm going to pass it off to you. Feel free to get started when you're ready.
Okay, thank you very much, Chelsea. And thank you for joining our webinar today about using NextGen PM tools for managing unapplied copays, deposits, refunds, and credit balances. And here's an agenda of what we're going to cover today. We're going to basically cover 2 areas that are related to the practice management side of the organization: handling credit balances on your patient accounts and processing of unapplied balances on your patient accounts. You'll gain an understanding of how you can do this more efficiently and more effectively using our 2 add-on products, Refund Manager and the Unapplied Deposit Manager software. And then I'll tell you a little bit about who we are, and we'll answer any questions that you have at the end. Today's format of the webinar is, I'm going to start out by giving you an overview so you have some background on the 2 products, and then I'm going to turn it over to Joe, and he's going to show you how each of the products work and be able to help your staff be more efficient, more productive when processing credit balances and unapplied balances on your patient accounts. This is a slide that shows over the past several years, we've been talking to our clients about credit balances and refunds and unapplied dollars, and And the common challenges that they have expressed to us have been for credit balances, moving line item credits, issuing refund checks, and managing balance control issues. On the unapplied side, the challenges that they have expressed to us has been resolving a backlog of unapplied credits, keeping up with applying the unapplied money on a regular basis, and then managing deposit money for upcoming procedures is one that has come up most recently. In the past year, we've been keeping statistics on the common challenges that have been mentioned to us, and that's percentages that you see over on the right-hand side there. That is the percentage of practices and health centers that have stated this type of challenge to us. So as you listen to our webinar today, think about the challenges in these two areas of the credit balances, the unapplied balances, and what are those causes of the challenges that you're having. Maybe your challenges are one of these common challenges, maybe it's a different challenge. So with all of the products that we have developed, all of the NextGen Add-on Products that we've developed, there's a common theme that we have with all of these products, and that is to make the job easier and make the process more efficient and increase productivity. Our add-on products were developed because a problem was identified with the process. We applied technology to the process in order to make it more efficient, to free up people's time, and then finally enabling the organizations to do more with the same amount of people. So with Refund Manager, what we did is we looked at the process from start to finish, and we looked for ways that we could streamline and automate the credit balance handling, refund check processing within the practice. When we were done, it translated into enabling you to be more effective and more efficient with managing credit balances. So how is this done? Well, first we streamlined the process on the front end by making it much easier to find the credit balances on the patient accounts through the various filters and search mechanisms that we've created, and also by giving you the ability to apply credits to encounters with open balances on them. And then second, we automated the process by eliminating data entry work. So one area that we accomplished this at was by interfacing with your accounting application. So it makes it much easier for you to move the refund check information from NextGen to your accounting application. And then finally, for those of you that have multiple practices set up in NextGen, a Refund Manager has the ability, the capability to look across all practices for a full picture, so you don't have to switch between the practices. This is a slide that kind of looks at the whole process from start to finish and looks at how Refund Manager affects that process in making the improvements that we made. On the front end, you typically will look for a refund on a proactive basis or reactive basis. Proactive basis meaning that you, on a regular basis, print out a report and you go through the processing of credit balances on a regular basis, once a week, once every 2 weeks, and you're processing the credit balances. On a reactive basis means a patient calls up and says, I have a credit on my account, I would like to have a refund issued to me. In either case, you're going to go through a series of steps to process that credit. You're going to look at the encounter details, you're going to look at the transaction details, you're going to get the account details, and then you're going to make a decision on what to do with that credit. You're going to either issue a refund probably, or maybe apply it to an encounter that has an open balance on it. You're going to take some action on it. Once you get through that process, you're going to move that refund information over to your accounting group, and how it gets over there varies from practice to practice, organization to organization. It happens by word of mouth, it happens by a spreadsheet, it happens by dropping a set of papers on a person's desk. Somehow it gets over there. And then the accounting people enter that refund information in the accounting application, and then they print out the check. So it's a manual process that they go through of entering in the name of the person receiving the check, the address of the person, the amount of the check. That information gets entered in. And then on the back end, when the refund checks are printed, some organizations bring that printed check information over into NextGen and update the patient account with that information. So they're updating it on a manual basis. They're updating the check number, the check date, the check amount. And some organizations don't do that process. What Refund Manager does, and what we looked at, was touching each one of these areas with technology. And the grayed out boxes are the areas that have been touched by Refund Manager. The front end, in the way that we present the information to you, makes it much easier for you to make decisions on what to do with that credit. We integrate, as I mentioned earlier, integrate with your accounting application. So getting that information, the refund information over accounting, is a seamless process. The accounting people don't have to enter that information in. It can be fed in to the accounting application. So eliminating data entry on that part. And then on the back end, we automate the process of bringing the refund information, refund check information back into NextGen, so it gets there automatically. So we call it streamlining on the front end and automation on the back end. And you'll see this process in the demonstration that Joe takes you through. You're going to see three modules in the demonstration. You're going to see the Credit Scout module, the Batch Detective module, and the Importer module. The Credit Scout module is the module that's used on the front end by the billing staff to find the credit balances on the patient accounts, to take an action on that credit balance, whether to issue a refund or apply that credit to an account that has an open balance on it, or task it out to the work log manager for to be reviewed at a later date. The Batch Detective module is the second module that you're going to see. That's the module that's going to bring the refund information over into your accounting application. And then the third module is going to be the import module, and that's the module that is used to bring the printed check information back into NextGen. So that's Refund Manager at the high level as far as what it does and what you're going to see in the demonstration. The Unapplied Deposit Manager is the, again, software that we developed to make the job easier, make the process more efficient, and have you become more effective in managing co-pays, deposits, and unapplied balances. Over the past 10 years in this particular area, our clients have been talking with us about unapplied balances and what to do with them. In those 10 years, we have found that the unapplied balances tend to grow over a period of time, and they grow, in the overall dollar amount for various reasons from organization to organization. And we also learned that organizations want to handle those unapplied balances specifically to their organization. So there's many different ways of how they wanted to handle it as well. So we were writing these individual scripts for the individual practices and health centers, and had gathered all this information. So about 3 years ago, we took on the initiative to bring all of that knowledge into this application. So we took all of that information that we gathered, created this application. So now you have a robust, flexible product to help the billing staffs manage the unapplied balances in a more efficient manner. And I think you'll see that in the demonstration. So again, it was another aspect of using technology to automate repetitive processes so that people can be freed up to do other things, improving productivity. With unapplied balances, you basically go through 3 stages. You go through to a process to find the unapplied balances. Once you find the unapplied balances, then you want to evaluate them to determine what you want to do with them. And then you have to create those transactions. Once you get through that process, then basically those transactions that you created, you probably have to go back and review those transactions make any appropriate changes if you think you need to make changes. And then once you get through that process, then you need to post them. What we did with the Unapplied and Deposit Manager software is did all the heavy lifting for you on the front end. So with the software, you're able to find the unapplied balances. You're able to apply the rules that you want to use in your particular situation. So again, from all the knowledge that we gained over the years, those are the selection of rules that you get to choose from. And then we create the transactions for you as well with the software. So you don't have to do all that. All that heavy lifting is done by the software. You maintain control of reviewing those transactions that are created, making any appropriate changes that you need to make, and then you control the posting process as well. So again, letting the software do a majority of the work for you, and you maintaining control of the important processes of reviewing those transactions and posting those transactions. And you'll see that in the demonstration as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe, and Joe's going to take you through the demonstration.
All right, thank you, Tom, and thank you everyone for joining us. We're going to switch machines here for a bit, and so your screen may flicker as we move over to the demonstration environment. So I'm going to take you through the Unapplied and Deposit Manager first, and then Refund Manager to show you how those tools interact with each other. An important thing to point out is that the Unapplied and Deposit Manager is really oriented toward a job that runs overnight that's kicked off by your BBP. However, for small sets of data and for demo and testing purposes, you have the ability to run those rules interactively to see the result that you're going to get for the Unapplieds. The reason I mention this is that Refund Manager is oriented toward being a more interactive tool where you're reviewing things real time, clicking to make things happen, so on and so forth. So for the Unapplied, you're going to give this user interface I'm about to show you where you set up the rules to one or two or maybe a few people at most, because the heavy lifting, as Tom said, is going to be done overnight. Refund Manager, you'd give that to as many of your back office analysts as you need to work through your credits that are sitting out there. So let's go ahead and jump into the rule builder for the Unapplied and Deposit Manager. With our NextGen add-ons, we go ahead and register them into the add-on menu so that when you launch them, they know right away, who you are, what practice you're in, what environment you're pointing at. Is it NG Test, NG Prod, so on and so forth. The way we like to demonstrate the Unapplied and Deposit Manager is we're really kind of building a story about what you want to do with your unapplied balances. And we're going to start with something really simple and then jump and go with several different angles based on the common unapplied problems that we see NextGen practices taking care of. So to set this up, you can create your own rules or you can start from a template. But if you're creating your own rules, it's as simple as adding rows to this grid, picking what you want to have happen. Are we working right now on encounter unapplieds or account unapplieds? Let's take the easiest case where it's equal to the patient amount and go ahead and apply it. All right, that one is super basic. In fact, you can do that one from within NextGen Practice Management. But, of course, being a tool that does that, we want to cover that basic case. So now let's go ahead and say, well, what if the money's less than, right? What if it's, less than the patient amount? Do we still want to apply it? Do we want to leave it out there? Well, if we want to apply it, we just go ahead and add a rule and that one gets appended. Now, in the case of it being greater than the patient amount, that has a couple different options, because if the unapplied amount is greater than the patient amount due, your two choices are to apply it up to the patient amount due, leaving some money sitting out there and unapplied, or you could go ahead and over apply it against the patient amount and end up with a credit on that unapplied. And then you might use a refund manager to refund that credit out. What I'm going to do in this scenario, which I'm really kind of building a general cleanup scenario for unapplied balances, is I'm just going to go ahead and apply it up to the patient amount. We'll leave some money sitting out there if we're over the patient amount for the unapplied amount. And we can even come up with a rule about what to do with that, which is let's go ahead and take that remaining amount, all right, and move that to the account so that we can go ahead and say, you know what, on our account Unapplieds, let's take that remaining amount and apply it to the oldest encounter moving forward. All right, so the great news is this is a basic cleanup scenario for unapplied balances. We can go ahead and add rules to this. We can switch things around. We can constrain the rules so it only works for encounters in a particular location or provider, so on and so forth. We have some clients who come to us and say, you know what, we want to scope down the encounters so that it's only encounters where the insurances are zero. All right, and maybe we want to do the same thing with the account. So you pick as many or as few of these as you need, and then you can say, you know what, let's go ahead, we'll save this in production. The nightly job would kick off through the BBP, you'd come in the next day, you'd have some batches available, and you can set the descriptions that are used for those batches. But while you're testing it, you may say, you know what, I want to run this interactively just to see what I'm going to get. So we can go ahead and hit the run button, we'll save our changes, and it'll go into NextGen and create the necessary transactions to move those unapplied amounts. Now, all it's showing us here on the grid is the transactions, and it gives us kind of an audit of what was done by the tool, what batches those transactions are in. If we want, we can go ahead and save this to Excel. Because this is sitting on NextGen, we now have these NextGen batches out there that were created for us that have these transactions in there that did those moves. Now, let's say you don't like those rules. Maybe they didn't do exactly what you want. Well, while you're in testing, you simply come back here and say, you know what? We're going to go ahead and delete these batches, and then we'll come back here and try a different set of rules. So what I'm going to do now for the different set of rules is walk you through some other scenarios. So I'm going to clear the rules that we have here, and I can show you the templates. So here's our general cleanup template, which looks very similar to what we started with on the other side. If it's equal, greater than, less than, remaining, move to the account, and anything in the account, go ahead and move forward. All right, and then we can add to those. We can go ahead and say, you know what? Maybe our initial project is to clean up copay amounts. All right, we have all these, $10, $20, $40 copays sitting out there, and we want to get those pushed down to line items first, and then we'll come through in the next phase of our project and clean up kind of those general amounts that we were talking about, that type of cleanup. So in the copay template, it's really simple. Just, encounter unapplied equals specific amounts and apply up to the unapplied amount, okay, which, because we're trying to keep it on the encounter, we're going to say, you know what, do it up to the unapplied amount, which in some cases may over apply and you'll end up with a credit on the line item. And then if you're doing it that way, you could go ahead and use Refund Manager to refund that credit. Now here in the pop-up column, we have a button here we can press and we can enter in those specific amounts that we're looking for the copays. All right, and we used to write this as custom scripting for clients, and the idea being that it's capturing a majority of the cases so that it's an 80-20 type thing. 80% of it's automated. They go in, they review the batch, they prune out anything they don't like, and then they spend their time just manually doing the stragglers, but the bulk of the work has been automated for them. So we can come in here now, and now it added those amounts onto the end of the summary here for the rule. And just like before, we can go ahead and do a run and see that we get results. And if we look over here, we can see these were all the amounts that met the criteria that we specified. So just another way we've seen people work on the unapplied issues before. Again, we can go ahead and add additional constraints, only work for a provider, only work for a location, things like that to this. Lots of different options out there. The good news is, let me refresh this screen. If we want to try something else, we can just go ahead and delete the batch. Normally in production, you'd go ahead and review it and post it. But in this case, for the demonstration, I'm going to remove it so I can show you some different options that are available here. Now, I know some of you have third-party systems that take in payments via the web, via some device that you have, and those payments often end up in Unapplied on the encounter. And then additionally, because of the way your charges may flow from EHR or through some interface, you may not get the opportunity when the charges post in NextGen to say, yeah, go ahead and apply the unapplied money. So what you end up with is that disconnect of the charges out there with a balance, and yet there's still money sitting in unapplied. So we came up with this rule template, and again, you can build any of these rules manually, but these are just jumping on points. We came up with this rule template for interface payments that are sitting in unapplied to push them onto the encounter. And it looks a lot like our general cleanup with a couple exceptions. First, on the greater than case, we're going to apply up to the unapplied amount, not up to the patient amount. So if unapplied says $5, patient amount is $1, we're going to apply $5. Okay, so you're going to end up with a $4 credit, because what we found is in a lot of cases, people are keeping that money on the encounter and they want to refund it because it was money paid for that specific encounter. Now, obviously you can change that if you run your practice differently. So we have that one set up to go ahead and over apply. And then the other difference between this and the general cleanup is that when you're posting or when you're receiving that money that's falling into unapplied, it's normally using a specific transaction code. So I added a rule here that says, for the scope, limit the encounters we're processing to specific transaction codes. And here in our pop-up column, we can issue a pop-up and we can go ahead and pick our transaction code that we use for those coming across. In fact, you can add a number of them in here. In this case, we just have the one. All right, so again, same as before, you can come in here, save it. The job will pick it up that night if this is production, but if you're in testing, you can go ahead and do a run on it and it'll go ahead and move that money. Now, for this first one, we can see the patient amount due was $0, but we had $29 in unapplied. So that's a case where more likely than not, we're gonna see that $29 credit out there. And if we go ahead and post those batches, we can actually carry that credit through to Refund Manager. All right, so let me go ahead and this time, instead of deleting the batch, I'm gonna go ahead and keep the batch. And we'll go ahead and balance it out just like we do, because this is normal NextGen stuff. We're just creating the transactions on your behalf, so you don't have to do all that typing or have your people spend hours every week doing that. And then you'll see the transactions that are out here too. Okay. Again, for the Unapplied and Deposit Manager, you don't have to use these templates, but they're great jumping on points for some of the more common problems we see. It can be configured for a number of different ways. Now, what I've talked about so far has been pretty much the unapplied issues. We really haven't talked about the deposit side of the Unapplied and Deposit Manager. So similarly, we have a template for that, for deposit management. And deposit management, the way it's done is you're really mapping the transaction code that's used to intake the money to a set of service items where you want the money applied on future encounters. We have a screen where you go ahead and maintain that mapping, that cross-reference. And in this case, we set it up for fertility. So we give it the set of mappings a name. And then down here, we have our transaction codes that I was talking about. All right, so we'd set up a transaction code called patient deposit fertility. If I'm at the front desk, someone's making their payment, writing me a check or using their credit card, and we put it in as patient deposit fertility as unapplied money. Now the system, when it runs, it's gonna see that it took in money under that transaction code, and it's gonna earmark the money as for this tag, fertility deposit. And these are just names you free text, so you can name them whatever you want. So now each night when it runs, after it's earmarked that money, typically it's going to be in the account unapplied. It's going to go over here and go, okay, where can I use that money? What's it earmarked for? So we're going to look at the tags over here that match, which are these first two lines. Again, you could have one line, you could have 10 lines. And we're going to see that we can either map it by modality or by individual service items. So if we have 8 different service items and we're not using modalities, you'd have 8 lines listing out those service items and you give them all that same tag. All right, so the net takeaway is you're really building that mapping. So you take in the money, it goes into account unapplied, use that transaction code for the appropriate deposit for it, and then the system knows to go ahead and apply it on future charges using that. All right, so the great news is you don't have to worry about people keeping track of that. And again, especially if charges are flowing from the EHR into EPM where you're not having that opportunity to say, yeah, use the unapplied amount. So now for this one, we'd set it up. We'd pick these items. Again, if we wanted, we can go ahead and, do our insurance equals 0, stuff like that. We can build out those rules. If we want to see some of those constraints, some of those limits, we can go ahead and say, you know what, show me all of them. And then you can pick the ones that you want, right? If we only wanted to do specific providers or locations or just, a range of last names because we're in testing, things like that. If we don't change any of the defaults over here, when we save and reload, it'll get rid of the ones that we're not using. And in this case, it just kept the insurances are equal to 0. And again, we can hit save. Production, the nightly job would pick it up, but testing, we can go ahead and click our run button and we'll see it created a number of transactions for us. The first 2 are in the encounter batch. We can see over here in the batch description, and the other ones are moving down to the account. Okay, they're coming from the account down to individual encounters. So we can see, in this case, there was, $200 used from the money earmarked. Now, the great thing is with the Unapplied and Deposit Manager, 99% of your reporting still happens in NextGen because we're just creating transactions for you that exist within NextGen. However, because unapplied money at the account level in NextGen just kind of pools it all together into a big bucket of money. So, what we do is we provide you a report on how we've earmarked that money for future use if you're using the deposit functionality. Okay, and we can come up here, run our tag set report, and see the money that's been found. So here's the tag names and how it's been used. If we come over here to this column where we've got white space in the cells, this is money that's been put on deposit, but no encounters happened yet that met the criteria that used those service items. If we come down further, we can see that we've been able to apply some of the money. So in this case, we started with 1,000. We have 945 left, and here's where we applied $55 and the encounter was applied on. So you can go check it out and verify that you've got everything set up how you'd like it to be set up. Here was $400 that was out there, and we used it on 2 encounters that were $200 each. Okay, so the takeaway from this is if you're taking deposits and you'd like to take them into Unapplied and have that functionality managed for you automatically, this tool will wake up every night and do that. It'll capture the new money coming in on deposit, it'll earmark it, and then it'll go ahead and apply that money. So we can come here into NextGen and again, go ahead and post our batches. I'm going to do this one because it balanced out. And then we'll do the bigger one. And we'll go ahead and total that one out. Normally when we install Unapplied in Deposit Manager, we install it into your test environment and we'll work with you on defining your unapplied issues and the best way to tackle them, if it's something we can do in, kind of one project, or if it's several projects, right, to take care of them. Maybe we're doing a general cleanup and then a copay cleanup, and then we're into deposit management going forward. All right, so that's the Unapplied Deposit Manager. You can start from templates, you can build rules individually, but essentially you're building the story about how you're going to go ahead and clean up your unapplieds, or how you're going to turn on and manage the deposits. So I want to go ahead and close this screen and shift gears now and go into Refund Manager. So similar to Unapplied Deposit Manager, Refund Manager gets loaded into the add-ons menu in NextGen. So only the people who have the appropriate group membership will see it's out there. Now, Refund Manager, even though we call it Refund Manager, it's more of a comprehensive line item credit manager. So if you think of Unapplied as unapplied credits and Refund Manager is line item credits, you can kind of start to see the synergy of how these work together. So once the money becomes a credit on a line item, whether it's through the unapplied processing or through your general day-to-day work, then that's where Refund Manager fits into the picture. And in Refund Manager, we use the phrase streamline and automate. The reason for that is we want your staff in the back office to review the credits that are out there and have the tools to quickly make decisions on what they want to do with those credits. And their options are, do they want to move around the credit balances? Maybe they have one charge where there's a credit and another charge where there's money owed. Maybe it's on different encounters. So they can do those types of actions. Or is it truly a refund, in which case they want to go ahead and refund it, and Refund Manager interfaces with a number of different accounting systems and can go ahead and push those refunds into the accounting systems so that they don't have to do the data entry on the accounting side anymore. And then we can bring back the check information. So I'm going to go ahead and take you through the workflow here in Refund Manager. We're going to start out with the Credit Scout, which is the next-gen facing piece of Refund Manager, where we go ahead and search for credit balances that are sitting out there. And we can search for direct hits by last name, first name. Maybe we have a list of account or encounter numbers because we're getting a report from someone else that we want to go ahead and process. Or maybe we're just searching for credits in our database, in which case we have a date range to control the amount of results and the amount of searching that has to happen in the system to get those results. So normally in production, you just say, you know what, give me, 120 days out and start at 60 days out, right? So you have maybe a 60-day search range in that roaming window that you're continually working on, because that's kind of the sweet spot. After 60 days, a lot of your insurances are settled out, you've got your payments, and then you're starting to look for credits within that range. Now, because I'm working in a test system here and I want to go ahead and demo data, I'm going to open this up a lot wider than you normally would in your production system. We have some filtering in here to help define the purpose of the credits you're looking for. So if you're looking for candidates to move the money around, that would be the distributions. So we're looking for cases where there's credits in some places and debits in other places, because the best case is always to keep the money in the practice. And then, if you can't do that, that's the case where you'd go ahead and use these options up above to go ahead and refund the money. I'm going to focus on these charge filters today, but down below we have some additional filters so you can further qualify to make sure the payments were actually greater than the charges. So there's different combinations of these filters you can choose, and what you're really getting at is, if you think of your old school test taking strategy, where it's like, go through the test, do the really easy questions, do the next harder questions, then do the hardest questions, so that you can maximize the number of them you get answered. That's kind of how we recommend using Refund Manager is, go ahead and do the easier ones, then, work your way back into the harder ones so that you can get those refunds out faster. But I'm going to start with doing some distributions here and show you how that works, where we're going to move the money around, and then we'll come back and do another wave where we go ahead and refund out any money we couldn't move around. Tom mentioned earlier that the product is multi-practice aware. So if you do have several practices in your NextGen database and your user ID has access to those practices in your NextGen database, you can go ahead and get kind of a global view of the guarantor across practices here. If you're single practice, that's fine. It'll just show you your one practice. Or if your user ID only has access to one practice, it'll just show you that. You can also slice and dice by location and provider. We have some business offices where analysts are focused on particular locations or providers. All right, we can also, search for credits on by departments, financial classes if you're trying to clean things up for a particular insurance. And then we have appointment skip days, because if someone's coming in tomorrow, you can go ahead and keep that money in practice and use it against tomorrow's encounter. So you could say, don't include anyone whose, appointment is in the next 7 days, 14 days, 30 days, whatever your preference is for that. So I'm going to go ahead and click Find here and get my distribution candidates, because that's the filter we picked up here, and show you how a couple of these work. All right, so I'm going to start here on Shirley, and what we're seeing at this top level view is the guarantor, date of birth, the credit amount. In this case, for distributions, we're only moving around patient money because of all the rules regarding insurance money. So this only moves around patient money. So we'll see all of the credits here in the patient credit column. And then we have some other attributes in here too, because we have some practices who like to sort things differently when they're working through these to kind of prioritize them for which ones get done first. Now, if we want to see more detail about Shirley, aside from, she has a $50 credit, that, really doesn't help us a ton, we can click down and we can see the next level, which is the practice. All right, NextGen Medical Group. The level below that is who owns the credit. Is it one of the payers, or in this case, it's Shirley, who's the guarantor? And then below that is the encounter and the charges, okay? Now, again, that's great. It's meaningful information. If we want, we can turn the headers on if we're not sure what each of these columns are. Okay, once you get used to where everything's at, it's a lot cleaner with the headers off. So we gave you that option to take that away so it fits better on the screen. But gosh, we want more information here. Like, is this a real credit? Well, let's go ahead and click on the encounter number, and we can get a financial view of that encounter. And we can see that there were, a couple charges out there, and there was a payment out there. And then if there were any counter notes, we could go ahead and look at those too. If we want to see across the account what's going on, we can right mouse and get screens that mimic the financial summary and account summaries from NextGen. So we can see there's a couple different encounters out there. We can see it looks like in this case, we have it all on the same encounter, and we have money that's going to switch between charges. So maybe all the money was put on one charge because the other charge wasn't in there yet. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and click my checkbox here for distribution. Now I'm going to say, let's take the mystery out of it. Show me what you're going to do with the money. And over here on the left side, it's going to pair up these transactions. So on the left side, it's saying we have a $50 credit. We're going to subtract that $50, and the SIM is 99212, and it's going to move it over here to the same encounter, a different SIM that has $50 due. So it's going to go ahead and create that transaction for us to resolve that. Okay, it hasn't done it yet. Right now, we're just going through and clicking, what we want to have it do. Now, a little more complicated one is this one I'm going to show you for Oscar here. And again, all the same tools are available, the account summary, financial summary. To speed things up, I'm just going to pick this one to be a distribution, and let's see what the preview says. This one shows on encounter 1213, we have a credit of $295. It's first going to take the $236 and apply it against encounter 1214. All right, so it's going to fully pay that one off because normally it works oldest to newest. And then it's going to take the remaining $59 and pay off encounter 1215, and it's going to just partially pay $59 of the $67 because that's all of the credit that's left. Let's say in this example here first, because of various reasons, we want to pay off encounter 1215 first. So we want to control the flow of those distributions instead of just simply going oldest to newest. Well, what we can do is instead of just going to the distribution preview, we can take distribution matching, in which case we get your credits here on the left to draw money from and your debits here on the right to apply money against. So I just pick one of these. In this case, there is the one, but there could be several. And what I'm going to choose is to do 1215 first. And I'm going to build that pair instead of letting the system do it, oldest to newest. Now I could stop here and only pay off this one, or I could keep going and say, you know what, out of that 295, I have 228 left. This top one's paid off right now with the way it's paired up, so I'm going to go ahead and put the money against the second one, which just leaves an $8 balance out there. And then, you know, eventually we'd bill the patient for that $8. So we'd go through, we do our distributions, and instead of us going and creating all those transactions in NextGen to move the money around, we just right mouse, process. Here's our transaction code that we can pick from our NextGen transaction codes. We click start. It gives us a review of everything it's going to do. And say yes, go ahead and apply them to the batch. So that work of creating those transactions was just done in a fraction of a second. So now what about refunds? Well, for refunds, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use kind of a broader filter that says, let's look for a credit in any one bucket, typically on a charge or encounter, that's going to exceed the amount due on other charges and encounters within that account. All right, so let's make sure that, you know, if we're going to send money out, that the money persists as a credit across the account, basically. And we're going to eliminate, you know, balance control issues, the basic one where we have the plus and minus of the same amount. So it may look like a credit in one bucket, but they owe money in the other bucket, right? Like the patient may have a credit, but the insurance may have a debit, things like that. So I'm now going to click find and get some candidates here that have been qualified using the filtering for refunds. All right, so again, we're seeing the guarantor at the top level. I can go ahead and expand this down. We'll see Jennifer has several encounters underneath. And again, we can expand that down to the charge level if we want. We can go ahead and click on any one of those encounters. I can take a look at this and go, oh yeah, this one was, you know, way overpaid, so on and so forth. And again, we have the financial summary and account summary, so we can see what's been going on. And just like NextGen, you can expand the account summary. In NextGen, you double click. For this one, you just hit the plus box to see what's going on under each line item. Once we've done our analysis and we've said, you know what, we want to refund this, again, we just click the refund checkbox. If we only wanted to do one of the encounters, we just click down further, and then we can go ahead and pick, you know, one of those to do and leave the other ones unchecked. Because I want to show you how fast this system is, I'm going to pick to do all of them, and I'm going to go ahead and pick several others to refund out too, just so we have a number of these that we can push through the interface into the accounting system. And some of these are patient due refunds, right? This one's owned by the guarantor, but I can come up here and see where we have one that's the credit's going to United Healthcare because it's sitting in that bucket for United Healthcare on the encounter. So Refund Manager, while the distributions are oriented toward patient money, the refunds can be patient or payer. Now, instead of us going and creating all these transactions to do the refunds, we've simply clicked the checkbox. We do our right mouse process. Here's our transaction codes that are going to be used in NextGen for the transactions that get created. And boom, it just created 8 refund transactions for us without us having to go in and do all that heavy lifting in NextGen. So this is the streamlining portion of the process. Now I'm going to fly through and show you how fast the automation portion is. So I'm going to come into NextGen, and we have our batch here with our refunds in it. And we'll go ahead and total that batch out. And get it posted, and then we can send it over to the accounting system. Today we're using QuickBooks, but there's, I think, you know, up to like 15 of them we directly support. And then you can do your own if it's not one we support, we can work with you on it, or if you have talent in-house that does programming, we can generate just generic files that they can read in. All right, so let's go back to Refund Manager. We have our batch that's posted, so we may have a number of different batches out there that contain refund transactions that we want to send out. In this case, we just have the one. So I'm going to pick this, And now we're going to send this over to the accounting system. So it'll either open a connection to the accounting system and talk to it in real time, or it can create a file for your accounting system to read in. Either way, the accounting people love it because they're no longer in the data entry business. So they're just bringing that information in, they review it, and then they can go ahead and cut the checks. So I'm going to go over here to QuickBooks, bring up our check view. We'll see our transactions are sitting out there with the check batch waiting to be printed. I'm just going to dump these to a file. Normally you'd print them to check stock, tell it that everything printed okay. Now we have check numbers assigned to each of these, and to close out the process and bring that information back into NextGen, I'm going to go ahead and do an import. So I'm going to find the exports that we did that are still open. I'm going to say go out to the accounting system or read in a file, depending on the accounting system, and get that payment information so that we can update NextGen with it. All right, so now if we go into NextGen and we say, let's look at one of those refunds. So maybe, I'll pick one of the ones from Jennifer. So we'll bring up her chart. And we'll see the transactions out there at the bottom for the refund. And because we've completed the process, we have the check number, check date, check amount in here. These were 3 refunds that got consolidated onto a single check. We'll see they all have the same check number, so the check amount is the sum of all of them. Also, for additional documentation, when we created that refund transaction, an encounter note got created for you. And when we exported it, another encounter note got created for you too. And this one contains the address that was in play at the time, because now in NextGen, right, we can have addresses and refund addresses and override addresses on the transactions. Refund Manager has an address book too. So we can go ahead and document here which address was sent over to the accounting system as part of the vendor setup. All right, so that's the quick walkthrough of Refund Manager. Again, Refund Manager focuses on your line item credit balances. You can distribute them between charges and encounters if you need to. That way you can keep them in-house, or you can push them out to go ahead and be refunded. You can also add them to the work log if you see one that's really messy and you just want to queue it up to work on it later. In contrast to the Unapplied Deposit Manager we covered earlier, that obviously is your unapplied credits that are sitting out there. I'm going to turn it back over to Tom now to go ahead and finish the slides.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. I'm going to switch screens here again. Okay, so thank you very much, Joe, for going through that demonstration of Unapplied Deposit Manager software and the Refund Manager software. We have a few minutes left, so I'm just going to take you through a quick overview of who we are. We were founded in 2003. We have 20 plus years of experience with NextGen. We have 40 some employees in the company, most of which are consultants that move from health center to health center, practice to practice, working with you to, as Chelsea mentioned earlier, improve your investment in NextGen and get as much value out of NextGen as possible. We have worked in the 20 plus years. We've worked with over 350 to 400 clients that use NextGen, and during this time frame, we've become a strategic partner with NextGen as well. This is just a slide that shows that we generated revenue through basically 5-6 revenue streams: consulting, customizations where we can customize templates for you. The enhancements part is our productivity tools, of which Refund Manager and Unapplied Deposit Manager software are a couple of those products. We do provide managed services, so we can manage your IT infrastructure. We also have our own data center, so we can provide complete hosting services as well, and then help desk support for you. We provide either those in a point solution or in combination with one another to provide an integrated solution as well. Next steps moving forward. You saw the demonstration, and we talked about the 2 products Refund Manager and Unapplied Deposit Manager software. I'll give you a high-level overview of what those products can do. If you would like to have a more in-depth discussion about either product or both products and how it would work within your organization, contact myself or contact Joe. Our information is here on the screen, and let us know, and we can schedule some time either to talk in more detail or take you through a more in-depth demonstration and discussion as well. And with that, we're going to turn it over for questions.
Great, thank you so much, Tom, and thank you, Joe, for taking us through those demos. Again, thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm just going to remind you that if you have questions, you can type them in the questions area of the webinar control panel, and we're just going to go through them in the order that we've received them. We only have a couple, so if you have questions, now is a great time to get them answered. So first question, what is the installation process like for the Unapplied Deposit Manager?
The installation process is fairly straightforward. We'll work with you and your IT team to get it installed in your test environment. And then we'll have several calls with you, as I mentioned earlier, to go ahead and determine what unapplied issues you're trying to resolve and kind of the stages for how best to resolve them. The installation itself is usually less than 90 minutes, and then the subsequent calls are, really up to you how much handholding you'd like. We'll be there for you. And once we arrive at something that's working well for you, then we'll go ahead and work with you to get it in production. So it's kind of a high touch process where we make sure you're guided all the way through from testing to production.
Perfect, thank you, Joe. Next question, how much training is required and what does it look like for Refund Manager?
Refund Manager, the training is really straightforward, as hopefully you saw by the demonstration of the tool. We provide the user guide and about a 50-minute video to watch. You don't have to memorize it because, again, the workflow is fairly straightforward. And just like the Unapplied and Deposit Manager, we'll go ahead and set this up and test first. And then we'll have a couple phone calls with you where we'll push refunds through from beginning to end to make sure, A, everything's wired properly with the accounting system, and B, that you understand the process and how it works.
Okay, great. And it looks like this may be our last question. And it didn't specify which one they were asking about, so maybe you can talk about both of them, Joe. We run in a hosted environment. Is this going to be an issue?
No, both tools will work in a local or a hosted environment. We'll work with your hosting provider. We've worked with NextGen and several of the other partners in the past who host NextGen systems for clients. So either way, the software is designed to work in either environment, just like NextGen.
Perfect. And it looks like we do have another question. Can everyone have access to the tools and add-ons?
No, the tools and add-ons are constrained by NextGen group membership. So while you could get everyone access, I'm assuming you don't want to, and because most practices don't want to. So you just, as part of the setup, we'll pick with you, the groups that either you have available or you could create a new group and we could tie it to that. So it could be one group or several groups that can see the particular add-on in the add-ons menu.
Okay, perfect. Well, if you have any further questions, you see both Tom and Joe's information up on the screen. Feel free to reach out to them directly. Otherwise, you can always reply back to the email that I'll be sending with a follow-up to the recording and link to the slides. Basically, any way that you can get a hold of us, we're happy to help. So don't hesitate to ask. That is why we're here. And thank you all for joining us today. I hope you have a great day and stay healthy.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone.